And I'm delighted to bring forward our first expert today. Let's get to know John Wynn at Direct System Support, also known as DSS.
Thanks, Ella. Appreciate it. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We greatly appreciate it. As you know, my name is John Wynn. I lead the software practice at Direct System Support. DSS is a longtime IBM Platinum business partner. We've been in business over 30 years. We are dedicated to IBM. We don't represent any other vendors, but IBM, both in terms of services and their offerings, which includes enterprise software. Prior to joining DSS, I actually was on the global business development team at IBM Research for a number of years. And then prior to that, I've spent a number of years in the enterprise space, selling enterprise software, both on-prem and SaaS in a number of different vertical markets. That's me, Ella. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John, for that. Now let's hear from our second expert for today, Jared Wright at IBM.
Thanks, Ella. My name is Jared Wright. I am the manager of our tech team for digital sales for automation. Before joining IBM, I actually worked for Turbonomic. We were part of an acquisition with IBM. And then before that, I was an engineer and an architect for more years than I'd probably like to admit to, implementing Turbo at my last stop, which was a top 5 airline. And I'm happy to be here with you guys today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for that quick introduction. For our first data set, our team gathered insight from over 300 plus business and technical decision makers, asking them to identify any of the following pain points that their organization is currently encountering. And here's what we found. As you can see on my screen here, 10% stated it's working in siloed teams, while 9% stated IT teams rely on human oversight to make resourcing decisions. IT teams spend too much time and energy on expensive monitoring tools that provide limited insight. And as you can see, it's like at 7%. And the other of the data that we found, as you can see here, is on our screen. Now, I'm going to ask our expert, and I have two things. John, what are your insights on these findings? And what issues most often drive companies to explore FinOps tools?
Sure. Thanks, Ella. Well, my point of view, after having a number of conversations with clients and prospective users of FinOps tools, is that in fact, all of these issues that are identified here are challenges that organizations face. Some to a lesser degree, some to more, really kind of depend on the organization itself. FinOps tools, which can be a broad category of applications and offerings, are obviously intended to address all or any of these things. But oftentimes when I'm talking to prospective clients, I really want to dig in a little deeper and then not just understand the issues, but really understand their current environments. So, for example, if you're an organization, I'm sure most everybody on the call, if not everybody on the call, understands this, that if you're an organization that's moved to the cloud and you're working in a multi-cloud environment, or you're working in a hybrid environment involving multiple cloud service providers as well as on-prem IT assets and resources, the complexity alone of trying to manage that environment can be particularly challenging, both from an application standpoint and also just from a personnel standpoint, right? For example, in moving to the cloud, there's just some huge benefits of doing so, of course, but then I think a lot of companies can be surprised at the challenges that surround managing resources correctly and how quickly costs can get out of control. And at the end of the day, FinOps tools, whatever flavor they may be, whatever color they may be, are really meant to make for a much more manageable environment from a cloud spend or application resource or even application management standpoint. And hopefully automate a lot of the processes and make things more efficient as well. So I know that's a pretty high level description. I'll stop there, and Ella, I'll pass it back to you. But I'm sure Jared has a few comments on this topic as well, since he's had so many years of hands-on experience in this area.
Mm-hmm. Jared, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is a very interesting topic. I think that coming from engineering and architect, being on the side where most companies see IT as a cost center and as a spend and less of a revenue generation. It becomes a thing where FinOps is highly important. Everybody's getting told they need to cut their budget. They need to make sure that they're spending less. They're spending the right amount. Cut as much as you can. Be fiscally responsible. And so, as you can see through these responses, there's multiple nuanced reasons why people are driven to explore FinOps tools. But the biggest one is going to be just making sure your spending and your cost is under control and is
Right.
it's you're able to explain why you're spending what you're spending and why it's the right amount. So there's a bunch that goes into that decision for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that insightful, insights on this data. Now let's move on to our next slide. So we reached out to over 300 plus business and technical decision maker and asked them about their company's challenges related to cloud financial operations, FinOps. And as you can see, our data shows 25% share that it's cloud cost visibility, while 21% stated that it's unpredictable cloud spending. 20% stated complexity of multi-cloud environments, 16% inaccurate forecasting, and the rest you can actually see that on the data sets. So we've actually highlighted the top two, which is cloud cost visibility and unpredictable cloud spending. Now, I'm going to pass this over to John. John, what do you think about this data, this statistics, and how often is finance usually involved in tech planning? And should this change?
Yeah, thanks, Ella. So I guess the answer to your last question is it depends, right? I think a lot depends on where organizations are in their cloud journey or in their journey to manage cloud spend. I think particularly the last few years, there's been a recognition that as cloud costs increase, or in some cases, appear to be out of control, that there's a lot of questions that arise organizationally, particularly from finance, about how these costs are being generated. And it's very easy in those organizations that have a DevOps function, for example, for even individuals or departments to have a lot of autonomy in terms of spinning up or spinning down or leaving up cloud resources for development or other activities. And a lot of times that happens without a great deal of visibility. And that's where oftentimes finance or even managers within the IT organization really want to understand and get a handle on how that spend is being generated and how to manage it more effectively. So I think, again, as companies are looking to improve how they're managing cloud spend, as well as their IT resources in general, right? Their application resource management aspect of this, which is generally kind of falls in the IT organization, where cloud spend itself oftentimes raises to the level of finance, and trying to further collaborate and recognize that a kind of a cohesive strategy needs to be employed, using the right tools to really gain that visibility and provide data and accountability to either individuals or organizations that are responsible or generating that spend. So it's kind of, it's an evolution, right? You've got finance, you've got the IT organization. Oftentimes these days you're seeing companies starting to develop their own FinOps practice or center of excellence, which has been a trend. And as companies mature into that type of organizational planning, I think they're finding success in terms of managing their cloud spend and also having very clear communications and accountability across the organization from both finance and the IT organization.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, John. What do you think, Jared?
Yeah, I think that it's super. It's one of those necessary evils. I remember we used to call our finance department or the folks that we would work with budgets back in the day. We were frenemies, where we were friends,
Mhm.
but parts of times of the year we were enemies, and it just became a kind of a running joke. But it was something that was very important for
Right.
our the multiple organizations, whether it was, like I said, a large airline or whether it was a small oil and gas company. Like, the budget is important, right? And the ebbs and flows of the market and the ebbs and flows of business in general. You have those times where you're able to spend a little extra on this or that, and there's times where you have to really make sure that you're tight with your budget and what you're spending, and that it's not hindering the production or the revenue generation of your particular company. And so
Mhm.
it's a very fine balancing act, and a lot of times it involves a lot of spreadsheets, and it involves a lot of manual forecasting, and a lot of making sure that things are done via native tools and things like that. And so I know that when I took up that challenge, I was always welcoming new tools. They weren't called FinOps tools back then. I'm showing my gray hair and my beard, but they weren't called FinOps tools back then. They were just called
Mhm.
budget tools. But I was always looking for something that would help me take some of that spreadsheet, gymnastics out, and allow me to do things in a little bit more of an orderly, intelligent way of managing those resources. So, finance and tech, they kind of go hand in hand. Whether either team really likes it, it is
Mhm.
what it is, and they go hand in hand for sure.
Wow, that sounds FinOps, FinOps tools would definitely make IT, transformational, if I may say, like based on what I'm hearing, these are really exciting. So let's move on to our next slide here. So this is our last data set. So our team compiled data again from more than 300 plus business and technical decision makers and asked them about their cloud related FinOps priorities over the next 12 months. And here's what we learned. Like 28% of them stated that it's AI. 14% of them stated it's reducing waste. 9% is organizational buy-in. And the rest, as you can see here, accurate forecasting is at 4%. Analytics is like 9%. John, I'm gonna start with John. John, I have
Sure.
two things for you, What are your thoughts about these statistics? And what role can AI play in effective cloud cost management?
Right. Well, I wouldn't challenge the statistics. I can't vouch for the accuracy in terms of percentages, but certainly all these categories are areas of concerns that
Mm.
organizations deal with. So that's that part. Obviously AI is very much a buzzword these days. And we really haven't, we're not trying to impart a commercial message here per se, but if you look at the portfolio of offerings or software that's available through IBM with regards to FinOps or application resource management. They're all infused with AI to one degree or another. But really, and I think Jared would agree with this, when we talk to clients or prospective clients, in our view, or at least in my view, AI really gets down to automation, right? Because companies are challenged with lack of resources, lack of visibility into spend, and FinOps tools, once they're brought up and organizations have successfully implemented them and have a good understanding of how manual processes work, they really have the ability to automate workflows. And a lot of that automation is in fact done through AI. So whether we're talking about applications such as Turbonomic, which Jared has mentioned earlier. He's got a lot of experience with Turbonomic that really can automate your workflows and give you great visibility into how you're using your IT resources, or whether we're talking about applications such as Apptio Cloudability, which on the cloud side not only provides a lot of that, it can identify not only where your cloud spend is being generated, whether that be in your DevOps teams or really even third-party applications. Once you get a good handle on where spend is occurring, you can automate and really kind of provide the organization with that single pane of glass. And so you can become a lot more efficient, a lot more cost effective. And so I think what you see is that some of the issues that have been identified here, such as reducing waste and organizational buy-in, analytics, accurate forecast, and so forth, is really kind of an output of the successful implementation of these FinOps tools, and particularly when it gets to automation. That's when they really can provide a great deal of benefit for you.
Awesome. We have a question from the audience. Do you believe that lack of transparency and control in the cloud hinders greater cloud adoption across the board?
Jared, would you like to take that one, or would you like me to respond?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think that lack of transparency just kind of in cloud in general is a hindrance for quite a few companies for jumping in. The ability to control their own environment on-prem is important for a lot of companies, and that lack of transparency and lack of knowing what's going on all the time can definitely be a hindrance to going to the cloud. And so that's why, there are tools out there to help you manage that, help you see that. And, just kind of touching back on the slide that you've got there, right? Having software that can help you manage that and make it transparent and make it easier to manage is a huge thing for a lot of companies. And, with over 750 AWS instance types out there, like I said, I always called them Excel spreadsheet gymnastics as we were trying to figure out and plan and make things work in the cloud. And so I think that lack of transparency, that lack of even understanding what every bit of instance types do and don't do, and to make sure that this is the right one for my workload, is all of
Right.
that stuff goes into that timidness to jump into the cloud full force. And also why we see some companies that are kind of coming back on prem from cloud, right? It's kind of cyclical sometimes. And so I think that all of that plays into it for sure.
Hey,
Great.
Jared, sorry,
Mhm.
Ella, to interrupt. Jared,
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
risk of putting you on the spot, I was just
Sure.
thinking, knowing your background and experience if you can talk about it, your experience at Southwest Airlines in implementing Turbonomic, how as you ran the project, how you saw the organization come together as Turbonomic was implemented and being used and started delivering results. Again, sorry to put you on the spot, but any comment about how that evolved or what the impact was organizationally at Southwest?
Yeah, for sure. So it was a huge impact, and it took a lot of some coordination, right? So some trust building. Like we talked about, their trust in the cloud or whatever. Well, trusting a software, trusting a tool to be intelligent enough to make accurate recommendations and automate those recommendations takes some time, right? So there's a lot of crawl, walk, run approach where, we resized up, to make sure that performance was guaranteed first. And we did that in our dev environments and proved its effectiveness. And then, moved to the resize down with, promise that, hey, we will resize up if the performance deems necessary. And so it was great. And once you built that trust, then the application teams were more and more willing to jump on board and be a part of it, right? And it was really, like I said, we're talking about FinOps, which typically comes into like a cost savings type of a discussion, But in reality, all of this is a performance discussion, because if we really wanted to be cost effective, we would just scale all of our things to T0, to no resources, the smallest instance out there. And then, hey, we just saved all the money. But then your applications would they just wouldn't perform. They would die, and they would, you wouldn't be able to generate revenue in that way. So having software manage that, it freed up our department to run more efficiently. It saved me from having to be on 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning on call calls where we're finger pointing and it's the network problem. No, it's the storage. No, it's this. And being able to have software manage that, and me not have to do that, it helped my marriage. My wife was tired of the phone ringing at 2 in the morning. And so it really was. It was great for the organization. It was great for our infrastructure team. We were able to deploy much faster because we were able to deploy in t-shirt sizes as opposed to custom sizes for every VM and instance type that was done, because there was the guarantee that they would get the performance increase as needed. So as the data, showed. So it was huge. It was huge for the organization. It was huge for our team. And then there was a ton of cost savings in the process as well. And I'm happy to share those, individually if you'd like to know a little bit more deeper about those savings and whatnot. But yeah, it was huge.
Yeah. Hey, Ella, forgive me. I don't mean to be doing your job, but
Oh,
Jared and I spend so much time talking to clients about this. It reminds me of, not just the issues that are being posted as part of the slides, but just some of the things that we come across in talking with users and prospective clients. And maybe this is an obvious one, Jared, but I think what we always, the very common refrain or theme that we hear from folks is just, the enemy of over allocation, right? That whether it be a DevOps environment, or if you're kind of shooting in the dark about how to manage IT resources or even your cloud spend, there's this huge trend towards over allocation of resources, whether it be for an application or just for your particular environment. And obviously, one of the benefits of FinOps tools, either individually or collectively, is really the ability to kind of eliminate that issue, right? Particularly as people begin to trust the applications, which I think kind of underpins, the efficiency and reliability and trust issues that can reside. Yeah, I don't know how clear that is, but I guess I'm just curious again, in your previous experience, what you saw in that regard with regards to this over allocation issue.
Yeah, for sure. So that's what I was talking about with the performance aspect of FinOps, right? So every person on this call that has ever been, deploying an application of some sort, there's always, vendor specs that you can't go below, right? And every vendor is going to make sure that it has way over allocation on the resources, because they never want to have a performance issue, or else you're not going to want to use their software. So um, so knowing that, there were multiple times that we would deploy an application, and it's a little tiny application, but they want, 128 gigs of RAM and, 32 CPUs. You're like, what are we doing? Right. And so it's having the data behind it in a FinOps tool to help show that and why that's not necessary. It really allows you to run a more efficient operation, right? IT operation. And because performance is the name of the game. And every developer that's writing an application wants to make sure that memory, CPU, storage, throughput, IOPS, all those things are never going to be an issue for them, right? They're writing their code so that it's not an issue. And so they want all of the resources so that their stuff performs. And so as you have the data to back up why it's not necessary, then you can start, safely taking some resources back while still guaranteeing performance. And that's a huge deal. And again, building that trust. And any FinOps tool that you're using, that would be the first thing that I look for is reliable data to make sure that I can make those decisions carefully. And then, the next step being the automation to them so that my team doesn't have to mess with it. So that's exactly what would happen.
All right. Thanks, Jared. Sorry, Ella. I just got on a little train of thought there that I thought might be valuable to share, given, again, Jared's experience.
No worries. That's fantastic. The case study that Jared said. So thank you so much, John, for initiating that question. It's really fantastic. So wow, thank you. Jared, I was just wondering if do you have anything else to add, based on John's input earlier related to the slide and the data that I'm sharing, or you basically covered it on the case study that you've shared?
Yeah, I covered the majority of it, but I think that, this, to John's point, AI is a big buzzword.
Hmm.
I think that the majority of software coming out now has some flavor of AI in it. Um, and it is important. It's important to companies. It's important for companies to be able to even tout to their customers, "Hey, we are using AI, right? This is, we're taking out the human element of errors, and we're bringing in, AI to help with these things." And so I think all that's important. I think reducing waste is super important. That's something that I see over and over again. I saw before I was doing this, and I see it in just about every customer that I talk to now is, there's a ton of waste in the cloud, right? People spin up VMs, they attach storage, they use the VM that they need, and then they blow away the VM to save costs, but they forget to delete the storage on the back end. And that just racks up money for whatever cloud provider you're using. And you don't really even catch it unless you have some sort of script or something going out and checking those things for you. And so there's a ton of waste out there. Getting organizational buy-in, all those things. Like I talked about the crawl, walk, run approach. There's ways to do that, and any good FinOps tool will help you walk through that process and make sure that you have a solid plan for how to implement those tools. So, yeah, I think that those are my thoughts that I didn't get out earlier.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jared. John and Jared, the rise of FinOps is transforming how finance and IT collaborate based on, what I'm learning here. And this is a very, again, an insightful conversation. So boosting both cost efficiency and innovation. So I'm curious, what are some common pitfalls in implementing FinOps tools and how can organizations avoid them?
Thanks, Jared. I have an initial comment. I think,
Yeah.
and it's not just unique to implementing FinOps tools, but it's, any of these types of projects that can have a substantial impact on your organization or when you're trying to bring two organizations together. And that's really, I think, clarity of purpose in
Mhm.
terms of what you're trying to achieve, and agreement of what outcomes you're looking for. So in other words, before if you're bridging, if a gap exists, if you're, for example, if you're bridging a gap between finance and the IT operations group, and trying to get a better handle on cloud costs or your application resources or your IT estate, is really just having a consensus and clarity of what the outcomes are that you're looking for, and an agreement on the roadmap of how to get there. I think it's common sense, right? It's just almost the same as with any significant IT project, is just make sure that there's a clear and common purpose in terms of what you're trying to achieve, and let that kind of be your North Star when implementing FinOps tools. Because it is work, right? I mean, it's a commitment organizationally, it's a commitment from a resource standpoint. Obviously, companies like DSS and vendors like IBM are there to help with resources and provide expertise, but you have to have that commitment organizationally to make this a priority, and ensure that gets done.
Thank you,
Yeah,
John.
I'll jump in here, Ella, if you don't mind. I think
Mm.
that that's super important as well. I think that having buy-in all the way across, right from top to bottom, is huge. But having a timeline of what you're going to do, and having accountability to that process and that timeline, um, just helps keep things moving along, and it keeps your FinOps tool from being shelfware, where it just kind of sits there and doesn't do anything. So having that timeline, having that plan, and then having the buy-in top to bottom, and then communicating your progress up and down the chain is super huge in making sure that the implementation happens and that it's successful.